remain standing. We will have 1 minute's silence and reflection for the victims of the Srebrenica massacre on July 1995. Thank you. We will now have the prayers from the Mayor's Chaplain, Patricia Wilson.
As we stand together united in remembrance of Srebrenica, let us unite in thanksgiving and dedication. Creator God, we give thanks for the world in which we live, and remember in love all those touched by past or present conflicts and disasters. Those affected by violence, poverty, inequality and homelessness. And we pray that in care we may be the voice of the voiceless to strive for peace and justice in our world. We give thanks for our city of Salford and the people who make our city great, for the many volunteers who give of their time and talents to make other lives worthwhile and happier. And we remember those of this council unable to be here today for many different reasons. We remember and give thanks for the life of Dot Murphy, a former mayoress of our city, whose funeral is this Friday. She served her city well and was a wonderful support to her husband and her friends. She was a friend to many of us here, and so we have a loss of her life spent so well within our city. And we pray that she may rest in peace, and may her family and friends find peace and comfort. At the beginning of this new year, we remember the Ceremonial Mayor's Charities, Singing with Dementia, Salford by the Sea, the Birthing Unit and the Charity Chest, and pray that our fundraising will help provide essential resources to serve the users. As we begin this council meeting, we ask for patience and respect in discussions, and wisdom and compassion in decision making, as we work together to serve our neighbours. May we seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with you, our God. Amen.
I have not been notified of any announcements or special business. Apologies. We do not have any apologies for today's council meeting. Are there any? Councillor Hunt. Thank you. Okay.
Margaret Morris.
Any further? Thank you. Do any members have any personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest they need to declare for this meeting? There are none. Receipt of petitions. Do I have any petitions that need to be received? Oh, yes. So item 5 is minutes of the meetings held on the 16th of May. Are the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 16th of May approved to the correct record? Say aye. Anybody against? Thank you. I'm sorry, yes. Do we have any petitions that need to be received? None? Thank you. Membership committees for the municipal year 2018-19. Council has to note the no membership of the committee and panels as outlined in the report.
Councillor Ryan.
Item 7.
Sorry, I think we just went through, I thought we were just doing comments on the minutes, but we've gone past matters arising. I wanted to bring something up from the minutes. Well, on page 6 on the minutes of the last meeting, the three-step access was discussed, and I was just wondering, because there was a meeting of TFGM last Friday, if there was any further updates on that, if Councillor Jones could comment, please.
Yes, well, I suppose it's good news, really. This only happened on Friday, but if I can explain, in Greater Manchester there are over 43 railway stations that don't have step-free access, which is shameful, really, considering you know what's happened over the last decade. In 2009 we did a priority list, and in 2009 Walkden were number 4 on the list. Earlham was number 5 and Swinton was number 10. Anyway, members agreed last month to update that list and put new criteria in that more fitted where we are in Greater Manchester. And much to my surprise and pleasure, I'm pleased to say that Walkden Station has come out number 1 and Swinton Station has gone from number 10 to number 2. How's that? It's got to be Bill Imes who's been doing something behind the scenes, I think. So we've ended up with step-free access. The priorities for bidding to government are 1 Walkden Station, 2 Swinton, and Earlham has come in at number 4. So we've got 3 of the top 5 in Greater Manchester. So, you know, it's best to just acknowledge that and say thank you to TFGM and hope that those bids are successful.
Any further comments?
Councillor Peter Wheeler.
Councillor Peter Wheeler.
It's just arising from that, and again, get on. Step-free access and disabled, but I just wondered if there was anything, because about Eccles railway station and the disabled access. I just wondered if this had any implications for that, because clearly we've not got a satisfactory situation where if somebody wants to use Eccles station, they have to go to the next station down the line and get the train back up. But
No, I have to agree with the comments that you've made. When I said there were 43 railway stations without step-free access, that's true. But there's also another 11 stations that do have step-free access, but the ramps are not, would not be acceptable today as opposed to when they were fitted many years ago. So actually the total list is over 50. Now in the case of Eccles, and of course I've got to mention Pattycroft as well, and other railway stations in Salford as well as elsewhere, this criteria was done, you know, taking account of patronage, taking account of socio-economic factors, taking account of the GM Mayor's challenge. You know, there were, I think there were 6 or 7 indices which I can send you a copy of. But the tragedy, if you like, for your station is that you're not in that top group. And part of the reason, I suspect, is because you've got a Metrolink close to the railway station, and they do take account of that because other areas don't have a Metrolink, but Eccles does, and Metrolink is step-free, you know, sort of thing. So that's just how it works out, I'm afraid. But I suppose it's like anything else. If you have to get a list of 53 down to the top 5 or the top 10, how do you do it? You've got to have some criteria, and Eccles doesn't slot into that criteria.
Item 8, appointments of representatives for outside bodies.
I think we need to agree item
Just,
7.
yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I apologise. We do agree, Councillor asked to note the membership of the committees and panels as outlined in the report. Is that agreed? Yes.
So we're on item 7.
Item 7.
We can get that information to you, but there's been a number of changes. Item 7, is that agreed? Thank you. Councillor asked to note the appointments and nominations outlined in the recommendations of the report. That the Mayor is asked to present the updated list of appointments in the outside bodies, that after which will permit members to ask questions.
Who's going to recommend?
Councillor Turner.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. Are we on item 8?
Item 8.
I wasn't here at the last meeting. I was rather disappointed I missed the City Mayor's speech. But apart from that, and I notice he's moved much nearer me, and I don't know what the significance of that is, But just a couple of amendments. The territorial reserve, we've got down Councillor Clark. I don't know where it came from, but it should be Councillor Saunders. And on the GMCA scrutiny pool, you have Councillor Clarkson at the moment. That will read Councillor Leitner. Thank you.
On the Waste Disposal Committee, you will be aware that there have been some recent changes across Greater Manchester to achieve political balance, and the consequences of that mean that there'll be one member from the Labour Party from Salford and also one member from the Conservative Party in Salford. We're also awaiting further changes on Transport for Greater Manchester, but all of this is currently being discussed and deliberated by the leaders across Greater Manchester. Just to note that Councillor Bellamy will not be the second nomination on there. It's for the Conservative opposition to nominate their alternative.
Sorry, keep getting up like this. It's quite disturbing. Can we nominate Councillor Robin Garrido to fill that vacancy that the City Mayor has just outlined?
Yes.
Councillor Antipas.
Sorry, I think there is an error in the report where I'm nominated for the North West Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, and I think that it's been acknowledged in past years that it's inappropriate.
Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first of all welcome the girls from school in my constituency, Bishop, for here in the gallery. Also, I noticed that we don't have any representatives, or at least not written down here, on the Airports Committee. The airports is something that we are one of the 10 councils that have a big stake in. We've got a lot of money, thankfully, that has come through it. Can you say something about the representation on the airport? Because certainly, as far as I can see, it doesn't form part of our official representatives, just the Mayor, part of the APMA, or if you could say something on that, please.
Sure. So the political representative on the Airport Committee for Greater Manchester is Richard Lees. So, not every local authority in Greater Manchester to send someone to the Airport Committee. However, we do have officers attending as observers on all matters related to Manchester Airport Group, and obviously they report back to the executive here at the Town Hall. So we do have officer representation there, acting in an observational capacity, I understand, who report back to the executive. We also have regular meetings as well with the executive of the Manchester Airport Group as well, who come and brief us as an executive and as a cabinet from time to time, depending on the nature of the business. To all the reports, yeah. We are a shareholder at the end of the day.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. A hat trick of standing up. I've just noticed on Inspiring Communities Together, there's a Kersal representative required. Could I propose Councillor Saunders for that?
Seconded.
Anybody against? Agreed. Thank you. Item 9, Annual Report on Ethical Standards. Councillors asked to note the report after questions.
So it's the monitoring officer needs to.
Oh, the monitoring officer. Oh, you mean, yeah.
Yes, Chair. This is a report that's required to be brought to Council on an annual basis, and it provides an overview of the work of the Standards Committee. And there are a number of matters in here that members will be aware of. Until relatively recently, the Standards Committee remained dormant until early 2017-18. Since then, it's met twice to review and approve arrangements for dealing with allegations of breaches of the Code of Conduct for Members, and this annual report is the first annual report. Apologies, and 5 are still ongoing. One case is expected to be closed shortly, and there is a further case where we're waiting for further information. In addition, the Standards Committee approved a policy on the management of unreasonable behaviour from complainants, and this has got some examples of what might constitute unreasonable actions and behaviours, and there are currently 2 cases underway where complainants are being advised that their continuing behaviour isn't acceptable. We felt it would be helpful for members to have a session with regard to the Code of Conduct, the Member and Officer Relations Protocol and the Planning Protocol, and that session takes place on the 31st of July, just really both for new members and as a refresher for existing members. Happy to take any questions that members may have. Chair.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Garrido.
Thank you, Sir. Can I welcome the report? We certainly now fall in line, I think, with the SIPFA report, which I recently read, which is going to Audit Committee next week. And I think certainly some authorities have adopted the basis of having a separate ethics committee. I think we've probably gone down the right route of incorporation within the Standards Committee, and therefore I do endorse the report.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Agreed. Councillor asked to note this report. Agreed. Anybody against? Thank you. Any questions on the leadership arrangements?
I think Chair, I think you need to just go through it.
Right.
Because it's the Chair of the Workforce Panel's report.
Right. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. You've received the report in your papers, as you're aware, or will be aware. In Trafford, there have been some departures in the senior leadership team there. Salford Council has been asked to assist in a transitional arrangement, and the Chief Executive, the paper outlines how the Chief Executive will be proposing that the Chief Executive does that, working half here and half in Trafford. It also outlines the remuneration that Trafford will be paying us to do that. There's no cost to the council. It also outlines the payment for any backfill services in relation to the Director of Place who will be stepping up, and the potential if there's any other support that's needed as a result of this. So it's been to the Workforce Panel, and as Chair of the Workforce Panel, I'm putting it to the Council today for endorsement.
Any questions or comments? Subject to ratification and decision, making arrangements at the Trafford City Council. Is that agreed? Agreed. Yep. Item 11, notice of motion. Councillor Ferguson.
Chair Council, many workers get a serious illness at some time in their working lives. They may require time off, sometimes for many months, to get treatment and to recover. However, sometimes there is no effective treatment. In these cases, the worker may face a time of emotional stress, fear and uncertainty. A terminal disease terminal illness is a disease that cannot be cured or adequately treated. And there is a reasonable expectation that the patient will die within a relatively short period of time. Usually, but not always, they are progressive diseases such as cancer or advanced heart disease. Being told that you're about to die as a result of a disease for which there is no cure or effective treatment, and that you only have months or at best a year or so to live, is a traumatic event, and everyone will react differently to it. Sometimes the nature of the illness is such that the person is unlikely to be able to work again. In other cases, a person may decide that they do want to carry on working, or sometimes they don't want to carry on working and would spend more time with the family and friends, getting their affairs in order and such like. But a lot of workers with a terminal diagnosis do decide that they want to continue working as long as they can, either because they need the financial security or because they find that the work can be a helpful distraction from their illness. Whatever choice a person makes, they should be able to expect help and support from their employer. Unfortunately, the experience of many workers is that they find their employer is either unsympathetic or puts up barriers to them continuing to work. If a worker with a terminal illness loses their job, they lose their income. They can also lose any debt in service payments they have earned through a lifetime of work, but are only payable to those who die in services. The TUC's Dying to Work campaign is pressing for additional employment protection for terminally ill workers who need greater protection from heartless employers who utilise a loophole in the law to dismiss the dying due to their illness. Every person battling a terminal condition deserves the choice of how they spend their final months. The TUC's charter, the Dying to Work Charter, is a voluntary charter, but employees working for companies who have signed up to the charter can no longer be forced out of work if diagnosed with a terminal illness. This should be the case for all employees diagnosed with a terminal illness, and that is why it's paramount that the law is changed. I believe that Salford Council shouldn't just be a good employer. We should be seen to be an exemplary employer. And that's why, as lead member for Workforce and Industrial Relations, I'm moving this motion today, which will be followed by the Council adopting the policy in relation to our workers who have terminal illness. And it's not just by passing the motion today, we're not just sending out a message to our workforce, but we're also sending out a message to all of the other employers in the city in relation to this issue. Therefore, I move the motion.
Thanks, Chair. Don't know how I'm going to follow that one. That was very well put by John. I think he's covered most of the points that I wanted to say. But for those who've seen Jackie Woodcock's video or had the chance to look at this motion in more detail, will realise it's quite straightforward. The purpose is to give people who have received a terminal diagnosis the choice of staying work if they want to, and for their employer to give them support if they need it. It's probably one of the more distressing times of their life for an individual. And of course, I've never had a terminal illness, and it's not necessarily to have a degree in psychology or empathy to understand the value of this motion, and or understand the reasons why workers want to continue in carrying on work. I think John's covered those points. At present, current disability legislation does not prevent terminally ill workers from being dismissed on grounds of capability, and as such, I'd strongly recommend that we as a City Council sign the voluntary charter, which will allow workers to carry on working and support them. Many councils, large and small, have all already signed the charter, such as Leeds, Liverpool and Leicester. Some far-flung councils, like South Lanarkshire, Sandwell and Ashfield, have signed, and even some of our neighbours, which are a bit less forward-thinking than Salford, have signed, such as Tameside, Sheffield and Bolton. This isn't just a public sector thing, it's also a private sector thing. So companies like Rolls-Royce and Royal Mail have also signed. So this really is the Royal Mail, the Rolls-Royce of motions. And the number of employees that have been covered in the charter is 594,000, which of course is not enough. And Jackie Woodall has campaigned for 3 years to get this motion passed, and it's gone to the House of Commons where David Cameron received it and said he'd look at it and hasn't done anything since. I don't really know what look at means, but usually it means look at with a view to some action, but in this case it was just look at. 3 years she's been campaigning to overcome and get this passed in legislation. And unfortunately Jackie's decided to stop taking medication for her illness now, as her future is looking less optimistic. Let's hope we can make the future of those who will receive a diagnosis look more optimistic and support Jackie's wishes for the common good and pass this motion.
Any questions?
Could you just amend your motion slightly to formally confirm that you are asking the council to adopt the motion and to adopt the policy on behalf of the council? Because whilst you said it, it's not actually in the written motion.
Agreed? Questions?
I've not got a question, but I've got a comment. Can I say that we agree totally with what has been outlined this morning by Councillor Ferguson? And I have to say that there's one thing I don't agree with you on it, because all the companies that I've worked for, large and small, including Marks and Spencer, has never forced anybody to leave their company. They've actually given them probably an alternative job within the company, probably an easier job for them. And I can't comment about engineering or anything like that, so because I've not had any examples of that. And I have to say that it would be a heartless person who actually did what you're talking about, and I think that that is why we should sign up today and agree to sign up to this charter. And this council has got a good record, and Councillor Ferguson is aware of this, on caring for our people who work for us. And I think we should send out the message that we're doing it and other people should actually look at doing it. I can't comment on the petition that went to Cameron because I wasn't aware of it. Perhaps if you'd have let me know that a petition had gone, we could have, Councillor Turner could have actually spoken to the office and seen what we could find out about it. But that was the first I'd heard about it today, unless I've missed it somewhere, because it's a bit of a difficult time for me at the moment. So apologies for that if you have sent it out, and we will look into it to see what we can do. And Councillor Turner will definitely look at it. But I think we should sign this charter on behalf of the council, and I hope that we do it sooner rather than later. Thank you.
I just want to say, I recently took out a life insurance policy, and one of the clauses was that it would actually pay out, heaven forbid I was actually diagnosed with a terminal illness. So in the private sector, and certainly in the insurance sector, this is becoming the norm, so I certainly would support the motion.
To say as lead member for health, that, you know, we shouldn't only be improving, well, I've got a commitment to improve the health and well-being of all the residents of this city, but we should also be trying to improve the health and well-being and supporting staff, which we do now with manageable physical and mental health conditions and people with disabilities, to maintain access to work, to be able to return to work and stay in work. So we've already got a health and wellbeing strategy, we're already doing this, so we need to take this additional step. So I totally support this motion. It's absolutely the right thing to do, to support those employees living with terminal illnesses, and to also make sure that the government put legal protection in place. And as
good employees, and there are some heartless ones around. And the purpose for fetching this today, I think that we are a good employer, but I think it's important that we as a council send a message out that this is the sort of standard that we expect. And it's giving a message to the workers here as well, that they have a choice. If they want to carry on working with a terminal illness, that's okay with us. If they want to finish working for whatever reason, once again, that will be all right with us. But it's giving those people, hopefully not too many of them, because we don't wish that on anybody, but for those people that do get into that unfortunate situation, we as a council will be sympathetic towards our workers. So thank you for the support here on the chamber.
Can we now move to
exceptionally challenging 2019 and 20 budget? And members of the chamber will be acutely aware of the budget position and the expectations moving forward to actually reduce our revenue budget further by another £16 million worth of cuts as it currently stands for 2019-20. This will mean that by the end of 2019-20, Salford City Council will have cut approximately £214 million since 2010. As we know, this is driven by a reduction in government funding by over 50% reduced, and it's also driven by unfunded budgetary pressures. I also welcome the recent government announcement to increase NHS funding by 3.4% in real terms each year from 2019-20 to 2023-24. I also note that we are providing as well an additional £1.25 billion every year to specifically cover pension pressures within the NHS. However, I do note that only yesterday the Office for Budget Responsibility commented that there will be no Brexit dividend for the United Kingdom, with their financial sustainability report highlighting that public finances are already weakening and they have real concerns about increasing tax revenue. Clearly, we have a government that has suddenly found a magic money tree in their back garden. However, for local government, it is critical that recent announcements and commitments don't translate into further cuts for councils up and down the country, and that government also urgently consider the need to properly fund local government. This is especially vital given the context of rising demand for services amidst economic stagnation, a tax on welfare recipients, contracting budgets across the public sector, and as we know in local government, the crisis we currently face in adults and children services. In my opinion, the greatest political tactic, if you can call it that, of the Tories in office has been to delegate the responsibility for cuts to local authorities. When libraries and swimming pools are closed, when nurseries and parks are under threat, and when heritage buildings and cultural amenities are staring down the barrel, all too often it's local councils which bear the brunt of the public outcry, rather than the government which has forced us into this situation in the first place. I don't think any of us got into politics to make cuts on behalf of the Tory government. Yet year in, year out, we are faced with the same heartbreaking decisions as to which much loved and essential services are next for the axe. We're already seeing the short-sightedness of this policy. Austerity, local government cuts fundamentally isn't working. And obviously the recent announcement on the NHS is in a sense the government rolling back on its commitment to austerity. Thankfully, they've started to listen to the opposition benches and what the Labour Party has been saying for many, many years now. The non-statutory preventative services which many local authorities once provided were in many instances the first to be taken away when budgets began to be cut. Whether these were intermediate care packages, children's and youth centres, local health and lifestyle initiatives, or homelessness prevention services. These services often acted as early intervention against social exclusion and the costs that often come with that. This year will be one of the most difficult budgets we've faced as a local authority since 2010. And I do not intend to simply be the face of Tory cuts for another year. And this is very much something that is occupying my mind an awful lot at the moment, and I am seeking to raise a joint local authority-led campaign to raise awareness about the impacts of government austerity in local government with like-minded leaders up and down the country. However, even with horrific reductions in our budget, Salford continues to lead the way, and the dedication and the commitment and the public sector ethos of the workforce and elected members should actually be recognised. And I want to congratulate our staff and elected members involved in a number of national awards we have won lately. At the end of June, we won Digital Council of the Year, along with Birmingham City Council, for using technology to transform public services. Also in recognition of our Digital U work with the Good Things Foundation to get almost 8,000 digitally excluded residents online in our city. We were also named the overall digital leader out of 100 organisations, an award which recognises those leading digital transformation in the United Kingdom. And last month, the City Council also picked up a further 2 awards at the prestigious Municipal Journal for Local Government Achievement Awards. These were delivering Best Outcomes Award for our work to reduce poverty in the city, again recognised nationally. And also we won Senior Management Team of the Year for building strong partnerships that benefit local communities. Unfortunately, we didn't win Council of the Year, but we did come runner-up. So this is a great achievement and a great tribute, in my opinion, to the hard work and dedication of staff in this organisation. Members will also be aware of the rail chaos that has hit our region and our residents. At the height of the crisis, complaints were received on a daily basis from commuters about the terrible rail service that was being provided. These complaints included delays and cancellations to services, overcrowding, issues of health and safety, and chronic understaffing. And together with the city's 3 members of Parliament, Councillor Roger Jones, Executive Support for Transport, and myself, we wrote to Chris Grayling, the Secretary of State for Transport, outlining the issues and the frustrations of rail travellers in the city of Salford. And we see this as an unacceptable situation, made worse by the fact that Northern Rail received one of the highest rates of taxpayer subsidy for any line in the country, when calculated at £0.01 per passenger by kilometre. State subsidy for rail is now around 3 times the amount given to British Rail at the end of the 1980s, receiving an average of £5 billion in subsidy over the past 5 years. And yet services are overcrowded, trains are old, and the price of a standard single fare has increased by 208%. Wages, as we know, have not. We have demanded reassurances that everything in the government's power is being done to remedy the crisis in rail provision, and that the residents and commuters of Salford and Greater Manchester will not have to indefinitely suffer from poor service on our railways. We've also asked the government to take Northern Powerhouse Rail seriously. We need investment in our infrastructure. We are playing catch up with the City of London and the South East. It is absolutely critical that that happens. However, on a more positive transport note, at the end of December 2017, all of 10 Greater Manchester leaders endorsed Chris Boardman's Made to Move initiative, which identified the need to spend 1.5 billion over the next 10 years to encourage more walking and cycling across Greater Manchester. At the end of May, Chris Boardman, in his role as the Cycling and Walking Commissioner, Andy Burnham and myself launched the Beelines initiative, Greater Manchester's strategy for walking and cycling on Chapel Street here in the city of Salford. The strategy aims to quickly deliver improvements across all areas of Greater Manchester to make walking and cycling the natural choice for short journeys such as trips to schools or the local shops, or indeed to the local tram stop, train station, or as part of a longer journey. People in Greater Manchester make around 250 million car journeys of less than 1 kilometre each year, the equivalent of a 15-minute walk or a 5-minute bike ride. So enabling people to switch to walking and cycling will help tackle congestion, improve our air quality, and get more people active and healthier. We have ambitious plans for Chapel Street East as one of the first schemes to be submitted to the new Cycling and Walking Challenge Fund to deliver the Beeline strategy within Greater Manchester. The scheme is modelled on the best Dutch streets, including continuous footways and cycle tracks, implied zebra crossings, traffic calming, street trees and rain gardens. The proposals will create an environment where walking and cycling are attractive alternatives to driving and will support the sustainable development of the city centre of Salford and beyond. And all of this is in addition to the significant investment the City Council has already made in recently restoring its loop lines for walking and cycling. Later today, I'll be joining students who are graduating from the University of Salford. They're joining a global community of 165,000 alumni from the University of Salford who have graduated before them and who now represent industry at every level, both locally, nationally, and internationally. We're rightfully proud of all the city's graduates each year, and the Alumni Achievement Awards provides a wonderful opportunity to celebrate and recognise the diverse achievements of a small but exceptional handful of this growing and vibrant alumni network. As a long-standing friend and supporter and colleague, I was delighted when I heard the news last year that the late Councillor Paul Longshaw would be receiving one of these prestigious awards. As many of you know, Paul has worked for Salford City Council for 25 years before becoming a councillor, and he was wholly committed himself to improving the quality of life for the people of Salford. The university has chosen Paul to receive an award due to his exceptional work on the nationally recognised partnership between the University of Salford and Salford City Council. Paul really was an exemplary advocate of the University of Salford, a wonderful example of how passionate individuals can help the university to achieve their vision for greater collaboration with industry and more specifically the local community here in Salford. Sadly, as members of the council chamber know, Paul passed away before receiving his Alumni Achievement Award. And it was with a heavy heart and pride that today we have the opportunity to celebrate Paul's many successes, and will be presenting his daughter Ella with this award later today. Finally, I'm sure you'll all wish to join me in wishing David Hearn, the Director of Public Health here at the City Council, all the very best for the future as he leaves Salford to take up a national position at Public Health England. Again, it's always interesting to see how senior officers of Salford City Council often go on to take on even more responsibility within the public sector. Clearly, we must be doing something right here in Salford. David joined Salford Council as part of the leadership team that oversaw the transfer of public health responsibilities to Salford City Council in 2013. David has also been extremely passionate about improving the lives of Salford residents, tackling big issues related to health and well-being challenges. And I'd certainly like to put on record my thanks to his commitment to the City of Salford and wish him all the best for the future. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any questions or comments? Councillor Green. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of what the City Mayor has said I agree with, but I would probably put a rather different slant on it. It's about as I think we should actually be standing here and welcoming the extra money which the government has actually given to the National Health Service, part of the commitment which they said they would make and which they've now extended the 3.4% for a much longer period. You've also, I think, glanced over the 1.25 billion which has been given regarding NHS pensions. And if that money hadn't have been given, it would have had to have come out of the pot, and that would have affected services. So I think we should welcome this huge amount of extra money, rather than, I'm afraid, keep complaining about wanting more. We all want more for the health service, but at the end of the day, you know, you mentioned about a magic money tree. Well, the only magic...
Just want to read what I actually said. Welcome the government's recent announcement to increase NHS funding. So I did welcome it. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah. At the end of the day, the only magic money tree there is are the taxpayers. That is the only place that money can come from. You know, and therefore, if we are to protect the taxpayers, that necessarily means that, you know, there is only a certain amount of money to go round. So there are only two choices: higher taxes, you know, or better managed, more efficient services. And I think from what you've been saying today, City Mayor, you know, the council needs to congratulate itself, and you did that, on the many things that we've achieved. And you mentioned the cycling, and I mean, we could mention a whole host of things across the city that this council achieved. And we've achieved that without the extra money. Right? We've achieved it with having less money to play with. And I think we've done that because our employees and our officers and yourselves have actually worked hard at becoming a better council and a more efficient council. And I think we do have to recognise that you don't necessarily always need greater sums of money, but you need the money that you've got to be managed better. And I do think we ought to be congratulating everybody involved on the way that that's actually been managed. We certainly don't want to go back to the days that we had 20, 30 years ago with inflation at 20% and so on. You know, the economy needed to be managed properly, and I do think that that's been happening. Just very briefly on the transport side, I think all of us would agree that Northern Rail, in fact, have made an absolute mess of running the services that they actually have been running. But I think putting that to one side, and that's an important issue, but putting that to one side, I think we do have to accept the huge improvements that have happened to the rail service generally speaking, across the country. And we look at the services we provide now from Manchester to London, with services in 2 hours, 10 minutes, trains every 15 minutes. We look at clean trains now, faster trains. We look at better food. If anybody remembers what the food was like on British Rail, it's one of the more cases of food poisoning. So I do think that whilst we've had problems recently with Northern Rail, nevertheless, we also have to look on the other side and say there have also been huge improvements. Because certainly I can just about remember you know, the sort of services we had on the British Rail, where you never actually knew whether the trains were going to turn up, let alone turn up on time. So, you know, apart from Northern Rail, I've made that exception. You know, I think we have made some dramatic improvements. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hines.
Is that on? Well. Didn't expect anything different from Councillor Robin Garrido. Here we are, going into what, the 8th year of austerity, of a government whose stewardship has been an absolute disgrace for the majority of people in this country. A government that took over in 2010, coalescing with the Liberal Democrats, whose only thought in life was to cut public spending. It was manna from heaven for them. They've wanted to do that for decades, but this gave them the chance to do it. And of course, the crisis of 10 years ago was a very, very serious crisis, no doubt about that. I would argue, I'm sure that the opposition wouldn't, I would argue that that crisis came through the crisis of capitalism, without a question of a doubt. And yes, the Labour government at that time, if I had a criticism, and it did some great things, was that it did support much of the plutocracy that was about at that time. And we got the crisis. But when we intervened, just after the crisis, remember this, the growth in this country was increasing. And then in 2010, when under the Conservative stewardship, growth for years closed down. In fact, we were in recession for a good number of years. So, when Robin Garrido says to the city mayor, welcome what's been going on, my good God, I obviously am not going to turn down any monies that come through, but welcome at this stage, when we've seen the NHS, for example, which you were referring to, has been collapsing for year on year on year. Still a great institution, still doing wonderful jobs, and I take my hat off to the nurses and the doctors and the people that work in that health service. But again, we see when you come out of hospital, that monies that the government said we could raise, it was raised, as the mayor quite rightly says, through the local taxpayer, which is not progressive, certainly in areas like Salford, when the majority of its people live in band A and B, which doesn't realise the tax revenues that we would really need to do. So it's unfair. But again, we look at the state of the economy at the moment. Yes, the mayor and I and the mayoral team and all of us have got to grow with the fact that £16 million more to come out next year is an absolutely frightening thing to think about. Where are we now in the economy of this country? No wonder the government expects us to make £16 million cuts, because there is crisis. I've said this time and time and time again. Crisis in the health service, crisis in education, crisis on the railways, crisis in housing. You name it, there's a crisis. Of course, Mr. Mayor, the biggest crisis of them all is in government, where minister after minister after minister chuck it day in, day out. They're like rats leaving the sinking ship. Thank you, Mr.
Never mind the general record of my client, the government. Look at some of the odd things that they've done. You know, no doubt he'll be telling you that they're kind to animals, they help old people across the road, that sort of thing, in the future. I just want to deal with some of the points that he made. He told us there's no magic money tree. Well, that'll teach me to believe things painted on the side of buses in future, actually. I know what he actually thought of that at the time, but the fact is that his Prime Minister, his client, has been saying, well, there's going to be a Brexit dividend. We're going to have all these extra resources as a result of Brexit that we're able to spend on things like the National Health Service, and then very quietly, of course, it'll be nothing like what was promised in the referendum. But nevertheless, we're going to be able to do all of these things. We're going to trade with the rest of the world so that we will be able to once more import chlorinated chicken from the United States and beef injected with hormones. That's the real objective of the government at this moment in time. And I'm sorry, right? We, I think, are a stage further advanced than this government. We actually believe in integrated care. We believe in the integration of the health service provision and the local authority provision. We know that when people come out of hospital, they have to be cared for. And who pays for their care? We do. Now, what we have at the moment is a promise of lots of money for the health service, but no promises at all in terms of what's going to be addressed for social care. So, yeah, great. We do welcome the money that she's putting into the health service. It would be nice, however, to actually acknowledge that people do have an existence outside of hospital and need to be looked after by the local authority. And I think the final point is councils up and down the country, Labour or Conservative, are running out of money. Can we just remind ourselves who actually controlled Northamptonshire, right? It was the Conservatives. They ran the council into the ground. Can we just remind ourselves who is the chairman of the county council network? Councillor Carter from Kent, the Conservative leader of Kent County Council, and funny enough, he was on the radio, and if I may say so, Mr. Mayor, he was actually denouncing the government in more apocalyptic terms than you were, actually, in terms of what he said.
On this occasion.
On this occasion, yes. He said that county councils are running out of money to provide for basic services. And the reason Councillor Garrido is on incredibly thin ice here is he knows, right, that Councillor Clarkson, I must always have a reference to you, Councillor Clarkson. Councillor Clarkson, when we moved the budget, congratulated the Labour group on how reasonable they'd been, how they were tackling the issues, how they couldn't find anything to disagree with. And now you have the nerve to say that this proves, yes, I appreciate that, this proves how good our officers are, that they can manage with less money. Well, I'm sure when you and Councillor Garrido, the other Councillor Garrido, are calculating the household expenses, if you say, oh, we can manage with far less money, I think you might get pretty short shrift in terms of actually arguing it. So, all in all, I'm afraid your client is guilty. Guilty of deceiving the British people, guilty of not being able to run even a sensible government, an absolute shambles as we've seen over the last few days, guilty of trying to actually deceive us, guilty, unfortunately, of having no future in terms of this country other than going with a begging bowl to the United States. I would suggest it's time to go and let a proper party take over the government.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I can't follow that as well as you, John. Absolutely brilliant. What I would say first of all is that it was wonderful on the 5th of July to celebrate 70 years of the NHS, an inclusive healthcare system providing services free at the point of delivery. And I was going to talk about the reality today of the NHS, but Bill, I think you put that beautifully. So I don't think I need to rant on about what we see today in the NHS. And yes, like the City Mayor, I welcome additional money from the government into the NHS. But the the social care system requires 12.5 billion to sustain it. So there's no good just putting money into the NHS. If they don't put additional monies into social care system, then I'm afraid the system will collapse. What I would like to say is I'd like to thank the City Mayor for his tribute to Paul Longshaw, a former friend and colleague who is greatly missed. And it will be a real privilege to attend along with Paul and with Councillor Warmisham today the ceremony at the university to honour Paul. I'd also like to thank David Hearn as he moves into a new role at Public Health England for all his hard work and dedication to this council over the years, and for his leadership over the public health team here at the City. And I wish David all the best in the future in ventures new.
Councillor David Jolly.
I heard Councillor Greedo say something along the lines of there's only so much money. Never for the future of the economy just doesn't come into the Tories' worldview at all. It's a zero-sum game, and this is where we got ourselves into austerity. You can't increase spending unless you cut it somewhere else or you raise taxes. You can't invest for the future. You can't generate growth in their worldview. And that is what has plunged us into austerity and the position that we are in now. Now, when we come to the National Health Service, the Tories here have done the trick that all governments do. They've said that they've included the inflation increases as new money. Well, all governments try that trick. But in this case, all they promised is a little bit more than they promised before on inflation, and still a figure which is slightly less than the figure that most experts believe is needed to keep the NHS surviving in its present perilous state. It's not going to improve the NHS, it's just going to, if we're lucky, keep its nose above the water. And it needs a lot more and a lot more investment. Key to this, as Councillor Merry has said, is social care, which plunges the NHS into further costs. And yet social care is in a state of total crisis. And all the government's done there, very generously it seems, is allowed us to put up the council tax to slightly plug a few holes in a system in crisis and then say, oh, we've given extra money for social care. It's completely bogus. What's happening here is we have a government in panic. A government which has seen if they don't do something or promise something, the NHS will enter a total crisis and they will suffer from it politically. So they promised this money, which isn't enough to keep up with what the NHS needs, in a state of complete panic. It's a government in panic, and it's a government which seemingly, from what we've seen this week, is on the verge of collapse, and the rest of the public and our citizens are suffering for it.
Councillor Collinson.
Thank you, Chair. For those with a medical background, you'll know what I'm talking about. For those who haven't got a medical background, you probably won't have much of an idea, but I'm just going to list some things for you. Oxygen concentrators, oxygen head boxes, central lines, gastrostomies, heart monitors, SATS monitors, etc., etc. Those are all pieces of medical equipment. I managed, because I was trained to look after a critically ill child in a home environment, 21 years ago. And I did that at home for 2 or 3 years. When that child's health improved, not one piece of that equipment that I had in my home was asked for back. And I would reckon that the cost of the equipment that I had at home was probably in the region of about £20,000 then. You go into any charity shop around the country now, you'll see Zimmer frames, wheelchairs, hospital trays that you put over beds to help people who are bedbound for eating purposes. The NHS most definitely will always need more money. People are living longer and therefore being treated for long-term conditions longer. Hopefully with early intervention we're dealing with some of those issues as they arise. But it's also got to be about management. And I'd like to think that now, after 21 years, things are being managed in a better way. Thank you.
Councillor Saunders.
Firstly, Councillor Jolly mentioned Tony Crossland. Seem to recall, wasn't it Tony Crossland who uttered the famous words to local government, "The party's over"? I think it was Tony Crossland. And secondly, can I just say to Councillor Merry, on his very passionate speech, much of which I agree with about Brexit, my own views were well known, I'm sure Councillor Merry will join me in paying tribute to his and my Member of Parliament for propping up the Prime Minister and her Brexit plans over the last few weeks.
It's quite a lot to think about there. First of all, I'll respond to Robin Garrido. As I highlighted, I did welcome the additional money in my speech, but as has been highlighted by other members, it's little more than meeting some of the inflationary pressures that the NHS are currently facing. And also on the issue of pensions, it's quite interesting how the government of the day deal with different parts of the state in different ways when it comes to paying for employment costs. As you know, part of our cuts figure year on year is about paying pay increases to the staff here in the local authority. I've written about this. Inflationary pressures don't form part of RSG calculations as far as I can see. And also when it comes to pay awards within local government, what happens? The government doesn't give us a penny through the revenue support grant calculations to actually pay that. However, when it comes to the NHS, clearly they're dealing with a different part of the public sector in a different way. So I guess what I'm saying here is, can we have some equity in the system? You know, a pay award in local government is the same as a pay award in the NHS, and it's the same as central government. Government should be financing these things. It shouldn't be creating additional budget pressures for us in local government, which then means we have to cut more jobs and services to actually meet that. As you know, this financial year, I think the pay award for Salford City Council cost us somewhere in the region of £2.4 million. That was a further cut, a further budget pressure that we had to find from within our revenue budget. In terms of the magic money tree, you know, government have been telling us that they're rowing back on spending and, you know, at the end of the day, we can only operate within the envelope we've got, but all of a sudden they're finding money for what clearly is a response to a lot of public pressure to significantly invest more into the NHS. And as Councillor Jolly has rightly highlighted, we've got a government in crisis here. It didn't really have a choice about investing more into the NHS. They had to do it because they know if they didn't, it would be falling over and there'd be a national crisis on their hands. In terms of achievements, yes, the local authority has achieved lots of things, but that's because of the fantastic staff we have working here and also some of the fantastic elected members who make great things happen within the city. However, I would like to remind you that over the last couple of years, we have undertaken a staff survey supported by the University of Salford to objectively understand what is happening within our organisation. And lo and behold, on both years when we did this research, what is coming out? Staff feel under significant amounts of pressure. They're going off with stress. They have anxiety because they're fearing for their job. They don't know what their future holds. You know, so we are achieving, but let's be realistic here. We're achieving by making our staff work harder than they have ever done in their lives, probably since being part of local government. And that is not sustainable. That is fundamentally not sustainable. Because what will happen there is it will lead to a situation where we have work intensification. That will then transfer some of the pressures onto other members of staff. You may see things like sickness increasing. So, you know, let's be realistic here. Local government desperately needs the funding to employ the people we need to do the jobs that this city rightly deserves. In terms of transport, and this is something I am taking an interest in, because one of the things I've asked John Lamont at Transport for Greater Manchester to do for me is a historic analysis of infrastructure, and more specifically transport investment in the United Kingdom over recent years, probably dating back to the years of Margaret Thatcher in 1979, because I'm absolutely convinced that we are playing significant catch-up here in the north. Yes, over recent years we have seen some investments, but actually there's a lot more to do, and significantly more investment is required. We shouldn't be cheerleading the crumbs off the table. We want fair infrastructure investment here in the north and here in Greater Manchester, and we want it yesterday, as far as I'm concerned. Councillor Hines, I agree with an awful lot of what you were saying, and in many respects the government have created a crisis, and then they have the audacity to come in on a white charging horse to say, here's some extra money we've managed to find from our magic money tree. This is a crisis of capitalism, you're absolutely right. It was a crisis in the financial institutions, and the state stepped in to basically prop up the capitalist system, and we have bore the brunt of the costs of that, certainly in local government, in my opinion. And I agree with you on Labour in terms of, at the time, supporting the plutocracy. You know, I think, you know, we really need to consider what our position is with regards to propping up capitalism, because we know it fundamentally doesn't work, in my opinion. Councillor Merry, you're absolutely right. The client is guilty, and it was great to listen to what you were saying, acting as judge and jury, it would seem, over matters relating to the government. But I think you made a really important point, and that was the chronic underinvestment in social care. So at the moment, the NHS is clearly being propped up because it faces crisis. But actually, if we are serious about population health, if we are serious about the preventative agenda in health and social care, we seriously need investment in social care, because keeping people out of hospitals should be what we're trying to do here, keeping them in the community, keeping them healthy, keeping them active, tackling issues of social isolation. All of that requires funding, and at the moment, you know, taxing people through a regressive form of taxation, that is council tax, as it stands currently, is not a sustainable way to finance those services. Councillor Gina Reynolds, thank you very much for reminding us all that it is 70 years since our proud institution of the National Health Service, and we should rightly celebrate that. Also, you highlighted the scale of investment needed within adult social care, £12.5 billion. So just to give you a figure, if you need that to go back to your government to ask for some money from the magic money tree, you've got the figure there. But I think you're absolutely right to obviously remember Councillor Paul Longshaw. Councillor Paul Longshaw, as you know, was a dear friend of ours and served this city well, and you know, I'm really looking forward to acknowledging that at the university later on this afternoon. Councillor Jolly, you're absolutely right. The government either has failed to acknowledge the existence of John Maynard Keynes, or maybe they do know he exists, but they don't really want to acknowledge him, because the government likes to always think that they're coming up with new things and new ways of doing things, when actually what we're doing a lot of the time is reinventing the wheel, really. Austerity is a zero-sum game, unfortunately, for this government. They don't understand that in times of economic downturn, actually investing and not necessarily sticking rigidly to your fiscal rules is actually the right thing to do for the benefit of society, but more specifically, our economy. Councillor Collinson, you're absolutely right. You know, for me, a well-managed organisation is equally as important. But it's clear to me with regards to the NHS that the additional money that we're putting into it barely meets, if you like, the inflationary pressures that the NHS is currently facing. And I think the government knows that the NHS is in crisis, which is why it's taken the decision to put that money in there. At the same time that the minister who's been in the NHS seems to decide to leave for pastures further afield. It's all quite interesting. Again, another indication, I would argue, of a crisis at the heart of government. In terms of the point that Councillor Saunders made, I think Councillor Merry can respond to that one, because I think it was directed at you, wasn't it? So, thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Ed. Hold on. Susie Mayor. We'll now have a 10-minute break. Item 14, general questions or comments to the Cabinet members on this discharge of responsibilities within their portfolios. I don't know who's taking Councillor Paula Russell's. Any questions, Statutory Deputy City Mayor? Item 14, Statutory Deputy City Mayor questions. Councillor Murray will take them.
Because Paul Costello is not here. Any questions for...
Any questions?
No.
Deputy City Mayor, Councillor John Murray again.
Councillor Karen Garrido.
Councillor Garrido.
Can I just ask Councillor Merry, he made under his comeback under the City Mayor about Brexit. I would like to know, he said the sooner we moved on as Conservatives, right, and allow Labour in, I'd like to know what Labour policy is on Brexit and where this city yourself stands on Brexit. Sorry, I'm not finished yet. No, sorry. And
not involved in
how much we're getting from business is actually receiving in this city. I know it's not yours, but you actually brought under Brexit, and this is the only time I can come back at it. About how much money comes in on business into the city through Europe. Businesses.
Well, we can get the statistics for you, but in my opinion, it's an enormous sum anyway, as you know. I was in favour of Remain. I still remain hopeful that we can get a good deal at the end of the day. I support the Labour Party policy, which is to call for a customs union. And I believe a substantial proportion of the Conservative Party do as well, judging by parliamentary votes. So yes, I disagree, and in answer to Councillor Saunders' point, yes, I do disagree with my MP on this. I happen to think that he's got a good record on many other things, but he and I disagree, and if you were a member of the Labour Party, you could come along to our constituency meetings and discover that and listen to the debate. I happen to believe at the end of the day, right, that we were sold a pop. I'm being absolutely honest. I think that the so-called advantages of Brexit are not going to be apparent, are not going to be there, which is why my party is calling for the continuation of a customs union, accepting the result of the referendum. If we get to a situation, and I know what's going to come next, if we get to a situation where it's a choice between a no deal at all and leaving, we'll have to make a decision at that point. Councillor Hines.
Just go on record, I voted for him and would not leave again.
Councillor Bill Hines, lead member for Finance and Support Services and the Common Market. Councillor Bowen Garrido.
Sorry, I voted to be made. Sorry, I voted to be made. The only thing I would add is, right, that, sorry, it's Councillor Murray gets me like that. No, I definitely voted to be made, and I've done for many, many years. The only point I was making, in fact, is that there was a referendum, right? People did decide what they wanted to do, and if you believe in democracy, you have to go along with that vote. Regardless of what you think personally, as I say, I wanted to remain, I still want to remain, but we had a vote. Democracy says you go with the majority.
Support Services. If not, we move on to lead member for Housing and Neighbourhoods. Councillor Garrido.
I'd just like to ask Councillor Kelly, in her role as housing, how are we doing with the cladding on these flats? Because I remember having to take the chair when it was agreed that we would borrow the money to actually start doing this cladding, and that was nearly 2 years ago. I just wondered how far we are, because every time I come up I can still see that cladding on the buildings. Thank you.
Councillor Mary leads on the task force with regards to the high rises, because as you know I took over from Councillor Longshore, but Councillor Mary leads, so I think he can answer your question. Is that all right? Thanks.
No, it's fine. I'm not sure you're going to like the answer though. We've started work on removing the cladding, on taking it off, and we're in the process of replacing it. In regards to the 25 million, I don't want to go into detail, and I'm happy to go into detail outside of this chamber. Suffice it to say that the Treasury, Her Majesty's Treasury, aren't very happy about the loan situation, and we're currently discussing it with them. They have, after a great deal of umming and ahhing, finally agreed that we are entitled to access to some of the 400 million that was promised by Theresa May, which originally they said we weren't entitled to. We were in an almost Kafkaesque-like situation where they were saying you're not entitled to the 400 million, and by the way, it might be difficult to lend the 25 million. So I don't want to go into detail at the moment, but I'm happy to talk to you afterwards about it.
Councillor Lewis.
Growth and Prosperity, just to make you aware that we have a regular verbal update on the cladding situation. We're hoping that we've got a plan to try and encourage more people to contribute to our scrutiny panel. So I would encourage you, if you would like us to ask particular questions, if you pass them on to our committee, when we have the next verbal update, those questions will be asked as well. Thank you.
Lead member for Environment and Community Safety. Councillor David Lancaster. Councillor Liner.
Thank you, Chair. The fly tipping and dumping is on the rise across the UK. Currently, the cost of removing this dumped waste is estimated at above £1 million a week. A few years ago, this council decided to change the household waste bins, instead of being collected fortnightly, to once every 3 weeks. At the time, the Conservative Party, we did put forward a proposal where we did budget for the fortnightly collections, but of course that wasn't accepted. I've noticed from the minutes from the neighbourhoods panel, recently they've been requesting for the costs and the reports and fly tipping from before the change in the bin collections and from afterwards, but that hasn't yet been produced, so we can only assume that the fly tipping is on the rise as it is across the UK. It's obviously not very cost effective, and it's obviously having a negative impact on the environment. Maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board and see how we can promote and encourage recycling in a different way across the city.
He recalls, as I did, that the Conservative Party declined to put forward in their proposals for the budget any change in the bin collection system.
Well, first of all, can I emphasise fly tipping is a problem which we've got to deal with right across, not just this city, but right across the country. There's no way that any information I've received shows that the fly tipping has been caused by the difference in collection methods. Fly tipping on the whole, majority of fly tipping is done by individuals and firms particularly. And we had a massive one which is costing an absolute fortune to clear. And the rubbish which is getting dumped in our streets by builders, cowboy builders, is significant. So I'm not convinced and never have been convinced, and I argued at the time when we were about bin collection, that fortnightly collection, but I've got to say there's no evidence to suggest that fly tipping is being caused by the frequency of collection. It's about people who, quite frankly, should be prosecuted and massive fines. I'm sick to death of the courts giving paltry fines out. They ought to be more bigger penalty for firms which do dump rubbish in the way they have done. I gave some evidence to our officers about 2 months ago, and they still not prosecuted them, about a firm which was dumping rubbish firstly in Bradford and then did it in Salford. We actually proved it was them what did it, and it's still not been brought to court yet by the police. So there is clearly an evidence needed to support the evidence fly tipping isn't acceptable. And what I make appeal to are residents themselves. They could help us a heck of a lot if they reported. We had one only yesterday where they actually said they saw the rubbish being dumped. But when you ask the question, have they got the registration number of the vehicle? They haven't got it. Well, you know, we need the public to actually come out from behind those curtains and actually say, yes, I saw it, this was the vehicle what did it, and let's prosecute to the fullest for those people. And clearly, as John says, when we made the agreement of the budget process, there was no allowance for any change in the frequency of bin collection. But we'd always examine it. Clearly, one of the things we have today, but from Greater Manchester Waste, about paper collection, there is a real concern that we've got about the contamination of our waste stream. Paper is, we want a commodity where we can sell and reuse. But if you see the material which is being put in these bins, including nappies, I mean, where it's come from that you can put nappies in paper bins, I just fail to understand, but we've got a massive amount of nappies being put in paper bins. So that whilst you want to report on further on recycling, I do emphasise that today was to bring your attention to the paper collection particularly, and the contamination which is happening, and is stopping us selling paper on for recycling purposes. And we're having our loads turned round at the tip because they are contaminated, which is not acceptable.
Councillor John Mullen.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to confirm to the councillor that scrutiny has asked for some information regarding post and change and pre-change figures on fly tipping. So I think it's a bit early yet to prejudge the situation as regards to whether it's up or down at this point without seeing the evidence. On a different tact, the scrutiny group is looking in depth at recycling, and the council is more than welcome to join us on our trip to see the challenges that face us in terms of reclaiming waste. So, and that's open to anybody who wants to join us on the 9th of August.
Councillor Saunders.
My question is not actually on the bins, apart from confirming that. It's about sport. There is a support member for sport, but I'm not sure under whose lead member it is. Would that be Councillor Lancaster? Yeah. In which case, can I say that I'm sure the council would join me congratulating the England football team on the wonderful success they had in the World Cup. It makes us particularly proud that there were so many players from the local teams and who were actually born here in Greater Manchester, even those that play for southern teams. But if I may say, so I was a little disappointed that the council, unlike other councils and unlike 10 Downing Street, didn't actually fly the flag of St George during the... no, I never saw it. Was it? Was it? Oh, right. Well, okay, okay, I must...
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Yes.
I mean, I'm very pleased to see all the students here today because I think it portrays what's going on in the council. I'm sorry, though, for the second meeting in succession, the television system seems to have gone down, which isn't just affecting all those people up there who are having to lean forward, but all those people outside who have not got the opportunity, presumably, of seeing the second half of this meeting through the televisions. And I hope that it doesn't happen next month or in 2 months' time at the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Lead member for planning. Sorry?
David needs to answer.
Oh, sorry, sorry, David.
We all congratulate the England team on how well they did, and I think they astonished everybody about how far they did get. But nevertheless, it was a real success story, which we give a great deal of credit, particularly to the manager, in the way he operated right throughout the World Cup. I just wish Salford were doing as well. The
rugby on the football.
The rugby. The one on generally what Councillor Mullen raised, I mean, I've got to say, one of the problems we've had on recycling report coming, remember that recycling report doesn't come from this council, it comes from Greater Manchester Waste. And Greater Manchester Waste as a body was disestablished in May, and didn't meet for the first time until last week. It was first set up a new body which has taken over. So the recycling report was the first we had last Friday, and you will be getting that recycling report. It's going to show you that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Derek Answorth, lead member for Planning and Sustainable Development. Any questions? Councillor Congrado.
It's just a comment really, and I'm sure he's well aware of it. Broad Oak, North and South, is now with the Minister, and it is due to be released on or before the 15th of October. And we're all hoping that it goes the right way for the council and for the residents, because it's been a hard, long fight. And perhaps we should be thanking the council now for putting one of the best barristers forward, QCs, forward to fight our case. He was absolutely fantastic. In fact, it made the other side, which is Peel Holdings, actually find the second best barrister, QC. But we managed to get the number one, so I was quite pleased about that. But if we could all hold our breath, and if we believe in anything, can we ask him if, or her, if we can actually have a good result on the 15th of October.
Councillor Amsterdam.
Thank you, and pay tribute not only to our barrister, but our first-class officers who have prepared all the information to defend the council's consistent position, which is to defend the Greenway. I don't know.
Thank you. No further questions?
Councillor Stone.
Oh, Councillor Stone.
Oh no, you're waving to them. Sorry, I thought you had your hand up for a question.
Lead Member for Children and Young People's Services.
Councillor Lisa Stone.
Lead Member of Children and Young People's Services.
Councillor Walsh, Mandel.
Councillor Walsh. Any questions? Thank you. Lead Member for Adult Services, Health and Wellbeing, Gina Reynolds. Councillor Gina Reynolds. Any questions? Yes. Yeah, Councillor.
I'm sorry that Gina's gone, so I will ask you the question. I don't expect to reply today because it is a bit of a complicated one, but I only read this morning with regards to the people who care for family members and friends. And in the whole of the country, it's actually gone up to 7.6 million people. And I just wondered if you could ask the officers if they could do a calculation on how many friends, relatives are actually looking after our elderly or infirmed within this city. I don't expect it now, and I'm sorry I didn't give notice. It's just that I just read it this morning. So I'm quite prepared to have it, and perhaps it could go to all members, please, if that's okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm also sorry that Gina's gone. Ask me any question, I can check it. Yeah, can I have a look at that? Do you want just infirm and elderly, or do you want children as well? Yes. And children.
It was everybody. It just was in the paper. I think it was in the, I hate to say this, it was in the Telegraph and the Mirror. So it's two opposites there. And I'm not sure whether it's been in the Guardian, but it was in the Telegraph and the Mirror. And I think it also came out from our bulletin. So if we could look at that, and then it's for everybody. Thank you.
Councillor John. Okay.
Yes, this is of interest to me because I had a meeting with the CCG to talk about partnerships with GPs in future. And one of the issues we discussed was the issue of young carers, actually. There are an awful lot of people who are caring, as you quite rightly say, for more elderly people or sometimes for younger siblings. And we were both concerned that A, we've not identified all of those people, and it's something we need to do, is to identify all of those young carers, and B, we need to continue to make provision. We're very pleased with the young carer carer centre we already have in Salford and the provision that we've already made, which is one of the things that I personally gave a commitment to. But we want to see how we can actually enhance that by working with GPs to actually A, identify these, and B, perhaps educate other people who are dealing with young carers. For example, there's issues around turning up late at school because you've got caring responsibilities. You know, the school needs to be aware of that and to try and make allowances wherever possible for that. And those are the sort of issues that we're currently in discussion with the CCG about.
John Ferguson, lead member for Workforce and Industrial Relations. Any questions? Item 15. General questions or comments to chairs of scrutiny committee panels. Councillor David Jolly. Councillor Adrian Brocklehurst. Councillor Mullen.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Guido.
It was mentioned about what had been outside with regarding the recycling guide from Greater Manchester. And I wanted to say to Councillor Mullen, we had our meeting on Monday. Were you aware of this? And if you weren't, can we have them in?
No. That sounds ominous.
Thank you, Chair. No, I wasn't aware that Greater Manchester Waste were coming in to do a presentation today. It would have been nice. We could have had a look at that and drill down on some of the issues they've got with recycling, cardboard and contamination. I can reassure Councillor Garrido that I will be asking him to come back in and we can have the opportunity to look in detail to the challenges we face.
Councillor Lancaster.
Well, I did say when I was answering the previous question that as far as I'm concerned, scrutiny, you're welcome to listen to the report which the Greater Manchester will give, but they only came into being last Friday. So the report which we're talking about recycling was given to the meeting last Friday and will actually be going to scrutiny and to me as well. As to when people knew about this yesterday, I found out yesterday that they were going to do a presentation at council and asked me if I'd have my photograph taken with about the recycling proposals. Well, that was the first time I knew about it, but I do think it's important to recognise Greater Manchester Waste have been coming from a very slow start because of the reorganisation that has taken place.
It's no criticism. This document, this very shiny piece of material, right, has not just been produced, Councillor Lancaster, since Friday. So it was known about. And if our officers had known about it, right, we should have had that information. Even if we hadn't had this, at the scrutiny, we should have been said, well, Greater Manchester are doing a recycling. I'm not having a go at you, David, but I'm sorry, Councillor Lancaster. It's just that we are supposed to be scrutinising it, and it didn't come to scrutiny, right? And we weren't told that this. All we were told about was yoghurt. What was it? Yoghurt. Yoghurt pots are not acceptable. So I just think it was an opportunity missed. Thank you.
Okay. Council, Health and Adult Scrutiny Panel. Growth and Prosperity Scrutiny Panel. Item 16, questions or comments on the discharge of functions of joint authorities and outside bodies. Scheduled reports from the board members. Salford Council for Voluntary Services, Bridgewater Canal Trust, Stadium Joint Venture Company. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you. Yeah, I read through the report on the stadium. There's not meant to be a political comment at all. It mentions all the wonderful things they're doing, and that's really great. It mentions it's got a capacity of, I think, 11,500 currently, which they want to increase. I was listening to the Greater Manchester Rugby programme last week. I was in the car, so I was listening to that. And people were complaining about the very low crowds that Salford are attracting, even when they're playing well. And people were saying, blaming all sorts of things, such as the poor transport links, the poor atmosphere in the stadium. You can listen to this, I'll tell you where it was, on Greater Manchester Radio. That's glossed over in this report. To be fair, it doesn't say the crowds are fantastic. It doesn't say anything at all. It just mentions the capacity, and it goes quickly on to the next point. So that's just something I wanted to mention. Sorry? Oh,
Councillor Lancaster.
Well, I want to make it clear the report is a report of the Stadium Board, which is not a report of Salford Reds. And so the capacity of what Salford Reds get are not an issue as part of this report. I do say, however, that the access problems have been alleviated quite considerably since the new bridge was opened, and the traffic flow to and from the stadium is a lot easier than it was. Sale have done quite well on crowds. The last average crowd they were getting was about 5,500, so they don't seem to see it's a problem about transport. I've got to put it down to, and I'm a Salford supporter, if you're not playing well, you're not going to get the crowds. And I regret to say that Salford's performance has been so poor that attendance has dropped off. We're averaging 3,500, they're now averaging just over 2,000, which is not an acceptable way for any rugby club to survive. They've got to do something about spectators, but unless they start winning, and all they're doing is selling players, which is the criticism I've got of it, they're selling players and not bringing any new players in. I watched the rugby programme yesterday, and actual fact that the manager said he's only got 17 fit players to put out last weekend when they played their last match. That's no way to go for a professional rugby club, to have 17 players to call on for a first team. So capacity issues, it's not a fault of the ground, it's a fault of the performance of some of the teams. If you're playing well, you get the spectators. If you're not playing well, unfortunately you won't.
Somebody asked you to sign it, but you couldn't make it.
I couldn't. We thought we might borrow Swinton, but they're doing worse.
Councillor Pevett.
As an avid fan of Salford Reds, I'd like to take umbrage with what you're saying there, David. Crowds have gone down for various reasons. One, there's a lot of people who didn't want to go to the stadium, unfortunately. Well, that's what happened. We had 10,000 at the Willows the last game. I know it's a thing, but when we were doing well, we only averaged 6,500 in the 70s. Last season we were doing well. We were top four, 3,500. Problem is, a lot of people took spite against the last owner. Didn't like him, didn't like his mannerisms. They weren't turning up. The same people are still not turning up now. We said they'd come back. But we have a problem also with public transport. I'm up at Wardley. If I'm going to a game on a Friday night, I can't get back to Wardley on the first bus, which my bus pass allows me to, because there's nothing after 10 o'clock out of Eccles. It's a different bus company. So people have that problem. I know the Reds fans are putting 2 buses on and things, but they don't come near me. So I've got to travel in public transport, go into Salford to go back to it. There's no north-south bus going there through a Friday night, so there's a problem with that. Sale are doing well with attendances because they're coming up the motorway. They're getting off there and into the ground now, they're coming through there. Whereas fans there relying on public transport are having problems. As along with the fit players, Castleford were moaning the other month, they had 11 injuries. They were down to 19, and they're top 3. It's a problem with rugby league. It's a hard sport. I know I've played it. So there's lots of reasons why the fans aren't going. And the fans, well, one bloke said, because he called him on Facebook, he's not going to go again. Silly reasons. Successful club may build some crowds in, but we need to look at more things that will get the crowds there, more things around the ground, more fun things. Look at what Toronto were doing and things like that. And our promotions like that. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Lancaster.
Firstly, let's be correct. The last year's matches which were played, the average crowd in the Salford Stadium for Salford matches was larger than what it was previously at the Willows. So the crowds are actually better than what they were at the Willows. Only just, but they were better. We've set up a working group of fans to actually look at how we can improve the facilities at the stadium. We want to hear from the fans about what the reasons why they're not turning up. And if it's about the facilities at the stadium, then it's things we can take up. We've had a meeting with Greater Manchester Transport to talk about bus services, and one of them was putting new bus stops in, which has been done. So they've been listened to on the transport proposals. If there's still difficulties, then we need to know about them. But I make a plea to all fans, get behind Salford. It's no use moaning when they drop a division. They should be getting there now behind them through the term start. I'm a season ticket holder. I support the Salford Reds. But I've got to say, it doesn't give you a great deal of hope when you actually look at the performances which have happened in a few matches recently, where they've been doing well up to the first half and been drawing them in half time. When the full time of the second half goes, they go to pieces. Now I know they're building a new team of youngsters, but they still need to win, and we've got to stay up in the division, because there are no future for Salford in any way. If we have to go down the division, we have to make it clear that with our utmost urgency we do our best to keep in this Salford top division.
Thank you. Could I just mention that the club have got quite a big element in itself that they're not really fulfilling. Work in Wigan, and the Wigan Foundation Trust, Wigan Rugby Foundation Trust, is out constantly with not only coaches going into communities and doing training sessions. The players are always there, and I've never seen anything to do with Salford Rugby Club down our end of the city. So I think the club have got a lot of grassroots and groundwork to do before they can start getting these crowds in. I don't know what it's like in Earlham, because they are pretty much an Earlham and Cadishead based club.
We do see them there.
Further around Salford, we need to see more of them if we're to get those crowds in.
Not the stadium company, but we've been meeting and working hard with a lot of the amateur clubs in the town, because there's a lot of amateur clubs. There's an excellent one in Earlham, there's one in Eccles, there's a number of Langworthy, there's a number of locations where there's amateur clubs. The foundation has got to work more closely, in my view, with the amateur clubs to nurture the game and to promote the game better than it currently is promoted. But one of the criticisms I've also got is that you might find that electronic means what fixtures are, but how often do you see a notice board to say the fixtures are when the fixtures are being played? They're not there anymore.
This is a report on the stadium. Working Class Movement Library. Dates of future meetings to be noted. That is the end. I'm sorry. Yes, Councillor Collinson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to place on record our thanks for changing the council date in September. As you know, the 19th of September is the Day of Atonement, which is the most religious day in the Jewish calendar, and you very kindly changed the meeting to the 26th of September. So I just wanted to thank the powers that be for that. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
and girls from the school, and I did try and encourage them to get into politics because, as you might notice, in this chamber we are unrepresented as respect women and unrepresented as respect BAME members. So hopefully I've done something to encourage some of them to get to become councillors in the future. And finally, I'd just like to say, before we next meet, it will be the Heritage Weekend, and there are many, many things going on in Swinton and I'm sure in your areas, and it's very important to attend these heritage events because we should all know the heritage of our great city. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I had a word with some of the girls as well, and they're very interested. Can I just say, in fact, regarding the August meeting, special meeting, as it's been called, August normally is the month when certainly councillors can book the holidays without any problems and so on. And I think certainly quite a number of us are going to be disenfranchised at that meeting in August. I know it is only about the boundaries, and it's probably just a statutory thing that has to be done. But I would have thought, in fact, that we've known about the cut-off point for the boundaries for quite some time now. And I would have thought, in fact, that we could have actually got it to the council before the August holiday period.
I sympathise with Councillor Garrido, but suggest that he might want to take this up with the Boundary Commission rather than with us. I mean, the problem is basically that we heard, fairly late on, that we were going to be given 20 wards as a basis for our submission. We couldn't really organise a submission until we knew how many wards we were going to be allowed to do. And you may remember we had quite a robust debate in here on that subject, actually. We cannot find a way of fitting it in before the 3rd of September and go through all the processes required, unfortunately, without a special meeting in August. It's the Boundary Commission that set the actual deadline, not us, and so we do have to work for it. And I do sympathise, despite the fact that I took my main holiday in June, but nevertheless I understand that most people have to take it in August.
Rearranging the meeting. I actually will be back for that meeting in August, but I'm afraid I won't be here for the training meeting the end of July because I've a long-standing booking to go to the United States, where I'm hoping to see my newborn grandson, who was born last week, who, unlike his father, will actually be qualified to become the President of the United States of America, having been born. Can I also just say what Councillor Garrido mentioned about not being told certain things? I refer to an email I sent round people a couple of weeks ago about not being told about a health event that was here as well. So maybe, we need to perhaps up the game on that. And finally, mentioning that, I had an email from a councillor from the other side, I won't mention the name, asking me if I could please stop pressing the reply all whenever I make a comment on something. Well, I don't want to end on a controversial note or get myself too excited, particularly I'm about to go off to the dentist, NHS dentist over the road, be back for the election meeting. But I'm prepared to offer a deal, if you like, to the Labour councillors. I'll be prepared not to put reply all to all the things that I send if the Labour councillors will agree to stop putting on Facebook or saying things in this council that the opposition do nothing. If you don't want to see what we do or what we question, then please don't. Well, that has happened. So it has. Well, I can quote you chapter and verse if you wish. So I'm more than happy to do that. But
it was just to thank the people who've got the televisions back on again.
Through you, Chair, can I confirm that the feed to the external has been going throughout? They turned it off briefly in here because there was an issue about the flow of the pictures, but it's been fine to the website.
Okay. Thanks very much for your attendance. Declare the meeting closed.